Sorry if there's a little start and stop there at the beginning. I was having technical issues. Um, Welcome back. Let me get my screen share going. And there we go. All right, so now we are on to week 2, and we're moving forward in time with the Gilded Age, Part 1, from 1870 to 1890. So we are going into an age of American history where a lot of times it's been told from the point of view of the rich capitalists, meaning rich people and, oh, all these things that was available. But of course, any era of history also comes with the everybody else. And so we're also going to continue what's happening to Black Americans post-Civil War era. Um, and we're going to continue on that story as well. Now, get the slide going. All right, the Gilded Age. It was a term that was created by Mark Twain in a novel that he entitled The Gilded Age. It was known as a period of rapid economic growth, materialism, wealth, and corruption. So I wonder if we're in our second Gilded Age right now. Who knows? Gilded is actually a term. I used to work in museums for 20 years, and so some of the artifacts from especially this time period and into the 1800s was called gold leaf, which was a gilded look. Means it's covered with a layer of gold, which masks what's inside the object. So you might see old picture frames from this time period that looks like it's made out of gold, but it's actually made out of wood with that gold leaf attached to it. Makes it look pretty, doesn't cost as much, probably a little more durable. All right, so we're going to learn about some of the extremes in this video of the Gilded Age. I will put some questions on Google Classroom today for this video. Yeah, there were some doozies. There was some doozies of what people at this time period would spend their money on. I think you'll find this entertaining, but we're going to skip past it right now for purposes of our lecture. All right, there's also another one. So this is actually a movie version. So we're not going to watch the movie, but it gives you an idea of what life was like. Nope. All right, so what's developing this Gilded Age? Basically, America goes through its second industrial revolution. So at the end of the Civil War to the early 1900s, the United States was under the most rapid and profound economic revolutions any country has ever experienced. I mean, we were outpacing everyone around the world. And mainly it was due to kind of 3 big things. Number one, factories. The things that now factories could produce was meaning that we could be this mass consumer society. Number 2, there was a lot of mining going on. You might have heard of in the later mid 1800s, 1840s, we have, like the gold rush happened. So these mines are now established, and the ore and the minerals that are coming up are providing a lot of money and assets. And then finally, the railroad. Mid 1800s, you get mid to late 1800s, you get the cross-continental railroad. Once that's established, now you can travel from one ocean to the other. And then as that's established, you're also getting the network of trains branching out everywhere else amongst the country. So transportation boom. In 1880, the majority of workforce, though, was engaged. Now, this is a changeover. Before this, definitely Civil War and before, most people were primarily farmers. You're living on your farm, you're not getting rich off of it, but you're surviving. And now by 1880, most people aren't, well, you may have a farm, but it's not your primary income. People are moving to cities to work in factories. And industrialization, led to urbanization. So that means that you might have settled in a rural area outside a small little village. Think, for those of you who are my age, think Little House on the Prairie, right? You had to travel a while to get to that little local village, and you might have one post office, one store, and a church and a school, and that was it. No, now we're getting cities, and St. Louis is a prime example of where you had a large population and now it's expanding outward. The railroads create what's known as a national market. It made possible what is sometimes called the second industrial revolution. Had those railroads not, first of all, crossed the country and then also spread north and south, this wouldn't have happened. Because if we're going to make a bunch of stuff, but we have no way to transport it, then you're not going to sell it. Let's think about the toilet paper shortage of 2020, 2021 with COVID. Because we had a problem with the supply chain, and the problem was transportation and people to drive trucks and trains to get that to where we needed, you get a shortage. So the growing population formed a market for mass production, mass distribution, and mass marketing of goods. I don't know if I have it here with me, but I'll try to find a picture of it when I get it home. I have a copy of something that when I was growing up was still in existence, but if you're like a millennial or younger, you probably don't know what glory this was. It was called the Sears Catalog. It actually dates back to the 1800s, and you got this big book, catalog, and you could order anything out of it. The modern equivalent is Amazon. So anyway, good times. So let's take a look here. We have a primary source, and just in case I didn't explain it last week, a primary source, actually this is a secondary source, but let me go back to defining a primary source. In history, a primary source is something that was produced at the time of when it happened. So think about a diary entry. People in the future are going to look back at Facebook post or Instagram and go, that's a primary source because they made it at the time and they even have a date on it. Now this is a secondary source where it took information from 1860 and 1880, and it's then was put in a book talking about transportation. But anyway, I digress. That's a secondary source. The image on the left is by 1860, by the Civil War, the railroads were entirely, like almost 99.9% in the East. We had some railroad lines here in Missouri, and definitely Illinois had railroad, but that's all it did. And during the war, a lot of those southern railroad lines that you see were destroyed. Really, the North had most of the railroad lines, which meant it had access to goods. Now take a look over at the right map, and you see, first of all, we've got railroads traveling from east to west. Now, when you get west of Missouri and Kansas, it's not too much. You're going to have to travel, like Montana barely had railroad access. And in Texas, it was really only eastern part, but you see the potential now that we have ways to get goods from the left-hand side of the country to the right. And keep in mind, they're still using boats to transport things as well. So this is a time where the spirit of innovation is coming through. This is where kind of when people think back on, not to plug a political phrase that's been corrupted today, but like the good old days of America, where we got our reputation as being go-getters, as being, you can make your own success, really was developed during this time. And that's because Americans were, at the heart of, we're going to create things. We're going to take advantage of these new technologies to create other things. So it really was an exciting time to live. Scientific breakthroughs and technological innovation spurred growth. One example, most people have heard of Thomas Edison, maybe if they don't remember exactly what he did. He's given credit. I laugh about this because some of his inventions someone else actually invented, but then he was the one that got the patents. And I think it was the light bulb, but maybe it was telephone. Anyway, he did invent a lot of things on his own, so we'll give him credit. So he's credited with the light bulb, a system for electric power. And once electricity is being able to be connected to your home and to businesses, now all of a sudden you're not relying on the weather, you're not relying on water power. There was a lot of opportunity to create new and great things. So here we're going to watch a short video about how electricity came to the homes. This is from a museum up, I think it's in, oh gosh, where did he live? Minnesota? It's been a while since I watched this. But anyway, you can see the home of Henry Ford, not Henry Ford. I can't remember right now. Anyway, so you're going to answer some questions that go along with this, and then we will, but I'll have you watch this on the slideshow that I attach.
When it comes to
All right. All right, man, so much exciting stuff that I'm thirsty. All right, competition and consolidation. This is when we also get like, because there's never a time in American history or any time in the world history where, you got all this positive stuff going on and everyone's honest about it. Nope, there's always going to be corruption and how do we adapt to the people who are taking advantage of the system? So businesses start to engage in ruthless competition. I'm talking bad stuff. Corporations battle to control entire industries. So we're talking, if you like, we're going to learn about a couple of these guys. One of them's named Rockefeller. One of them's name is Carnegie. And, they literally had control over every aspect of their industry. And what happens is when you have these big power corporations, the smaller organizations, they can't compete, right? Think about mom and pop businesses locally and how once Amazon came around, they can't compete with it, right? They're too big. And so what ends up happening is that at the time, the government was just kind of kicking back going, you know what? You're getting rich off this, more power to you. To hell with the little guy, saying things like that. And that's known as laissez-faire, which is a French term, laissez-faire government. So basically they're letting it happen. And, maybe those rich guys are going to help pay for my political campaign. And then I'll get elected to office and I'll just kind of not look at what you're doing illegally. Oh, wait, does that sound familiar right now? Again, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. All right, so let's take a look at this link. I can't remember if it's a video or not, but we're just gonna take a hot second to look at no, we don't want the ad. So we're just gonna pause that. But what is laissez-faire economy? Of course, it's not gonna play right with me right now. Oh. So I told it I didn't want the ad, but it came anyway. So basically laissez-faire economic theory dating back to the 18th century is it opposes any government interference in business affairs. So like I said, Mr. Carnegie, you're in charge of all of this industry but you're browbeating your employees to work 14-hour days and there's no bathroom breaks and all that. We're just going to ignore it. The driving principle behind laissez-faire economics is that the less the government is involved in the economy, the better off business and society as a whole will be. Here's the definition of what the French term laissez-faire means. It means to leave it alone. So America has built the idea of capitalism on this. Okay, enough of that. All right. So this question is asking us, what could be problems with that idea? What are problems today with, let's say, if you own your own mom and pop store and now you're having to compete with people like, Jeff Bezos or whoever owns Amazon? Like, is the government going to help you or are they going to help the billionaires? Is there a problem with that? Well, let's learn about one of these really rich guys. And back then, I believe they were just millionaires, but that would equal to billionaires today. So whatever. So 1890s, There's this guy named Andrew Carnegie, and he dominates the steel industry. And if you think back to the 1870s to 1890s, what was the primary form of transportation for most goods back then? The railroad. And boy, you better believe there was a bunch of steel being poured into railroads. He created his organization to be a vertical integration. What the heck is that? I don't know. But basically, let's break it down to I'm going to cut out all the middlemen. So I'm going to buy the places where they're making the steel. I'm going to not have to sell it to a secondary place to then sell it to corporations. I'm just going to own step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. In theory, great idea for businesses, right? You don't have to pay all these other contract works because you control it all. But what if you're not Andrew Carnegie and you work in this industry? Now, all of a sudden, you can't compete. So we're going to watch and answer some questions about Andrew Carnegie here with the Gilded Age. And yeah, I'll be curious to see what y'all think about him and Rockefeller at the end. So we're going to pass this real fast. It went too far. Now, the other gentleman we're going to compare, we're going to do a worksheet on this, is John D. Rockefeller. I actually have a connection to John D. Rockefeller in a sort of weird way. I used to work for Colonial Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia for 7 years. And I loved working for that organization. It's the largest living history museum in North America. And I think it's the second largest living history museum anywhere. So yes, I was one of those people that got dressed up in the old-timey costume and reenacted life around the time of the American Revolution. I digress. That whole museum and organization was started by John D. Rockefeller with the amount of riches he acquired in his lifetime. So as you saw when I went too far, we're going to have a video on Rockefeller as well. And you're going to learn that this guy, you know, started off ruthless competitor, but then when he had all these riches, what did he do with it? So I personally, for 7 years, benefited off of the legacy of John D. Rockefeller, but I digress. His field was oil. He dominated the oil industry. He used the terminology horizontal integration. So Carnegie was vertical, John D. Rockefeller is horizontal. And his organization, his corporation, buys and merges with his competitors. So unlike Carnegie, who's just like, I'm going to get rid of the competitors and just own every step, Rockefeller here is going to acquire the competition, acquire these smaller firms. So I'm not ending your business. It's just now you're going to work for me. And he was called a robber baron, which basically was any person who was attributed to any successful business whose practices were considered unethical. I mean, was he unethical? Watch the video, you can decide. Maybe a little shady. Maybe Carnegie was a little shady too. So again, you're going to watch this, answer some questions, and then submit this. Skip the video. All right. So here's the question that we want to think about here. Were these men geniuses? Like they came up with this brand new way to become uber wealthy in the United States where we support capitalism. Or were they considered, like, if they're geniuses, then hey, they came up with a winning idea, right? Think about, I don't know, I hate to say this name right now, but Elon Musk. Granted, he didn't invent his stuff. He just is taking credit for it now, but actually other guys invented it. He just bought the company. So he's more like Rockefeller. Or were they robber barons? Were they unethical? Were they doing things they shouldn't have been doing? Limiting healthy competition and robbing from the poor to benefit the rich. Again, history repeats itself. This is why even if you're not interested in history, you want to pay attention to this class because, ooh, we're repeating the same mistakes here now in 2025. So now you're going to be looking at some political cartoons, which again, I will attach here. And political cartoons, you don't see them too much anymore, especially with the advent of social media. But think of them as like today's memes, okay? Hopefully we all know what a meme is, where you've got a silly picture or like a little cartoon thing, and then you put a little snarky phrase. Well, that's not new. It's been around for a long time. So for example, let's take a look at this. Now, this would be considered a primary source. So here we've got this image of this guy, right? And let's just work our way from top to bottom. So in his, what's on the right-hand side, his left hand, he's got this nice light there. That's actually an oil lamp. Think about that one for a second. And it's shining bright, man. I mean, you got all those lines of how bright that light is. In his other hand, he's holding, oh, well, what does that say? He's holding the world. Like, I control the world. And just to make that point evidently clear, look at his head. He's wearing a crown. Like, oh my gosh, he's like the king of the world. He's wearing a nice suit there, right? He's looking pretty sharp. And then he's sitting on a barrel of oil. And the word at the bottom says Monopoly. Hey, I played that game Monopoly. Have you? Yeah, huh? Think about that when you play it next time. And then at the bottom of his feet is a bunch of money. So you're going to have some other cartoons in the slideshow that you need to look and try and figure out what that artist was trying to tell the reader of that paper. What is this an image of a genius that we should celebrate and respect? Or is this a negative image trying to call him a robber baron? And so you'll go through these couple of images and then answer the questions for those. So here's the next picture. This one's very fascinating. There's so much that you have to really look closely in the details. So on the slideshow, zoom this picture in because there's all kinds of stuff going on here. Now our third one, this one again, a bunch of stuff going on, so you might want to zoom in on this one. And that's it. So again, please make sure to fill out your guided notes, submit them so I can give you some credit for it. Go through, watch the videos, fill out the questions for all those, and we will catch you here again tomorrow.